6:30 and I'm like, "Oh, I forgot we are live. Hello, my dear.
Hello. Can you see I'm back?
You are back. You are not in the camper."
I'm not. We did full 2 weeks in Melbourne, Florida, and we drove 19 and a half hours back straight on
Oh,
Saturday. We got in the wee hours of the morning. Um, it's funny because just that alone would have knocked me flat the next day. It didn't.
that's awesome. Well, and
Yeah.
especially the stress and the fact of getting in late. I mean, I would have been, previously just like zonked.
Right, right. I think I finally got to bed like 2:30 or something. We were up by 9, dressed, and I was back out uh, unloading everything from the travel trailer. So, and then I cleaned and I was doing laundry, and my husband mowed the yard. And it's so funny to think back on that the lack of energy because we were eating so many sugars and carbs and things like that, and I was sick. I was very metabolically sick, with type 2 diabetes, all kinds of stuff. I'm telling you, for either one of us, that would have never happened.
Which is amazing. I am so glad that, you have discovered the abundance of energy with just changing things. I mean, how was it traveling, under a different lifestyle? Did you find it complicated? Was it easy?
No, actually, I found it pretty easy, but if everybody remembers from 2 weeks ago, we talked about, or three, actually, it's been 3 weeks, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. I prepped. I did a lot of prepping. I did the high fat uh, carnivore waffles. I made a bunch of those. And I ordered, and I'll show you guys. I ordered a whole bunch of the Power Pucks. I've got these and the little bite ones. I took these with me in the truck. Like, I didn't leave it in the refrigerator in the travel trailer. Like, this was all on me. I also made extra butter bites, and you can see here that um, I cut them in half so they're kind of bite size. But and I had bacon. So that's how I went. And I had plenty. I made enough to last me for, the 2 weeks we were gone. Funny that we're driving there, and we left like at, I don't know. I think we were on the road by like 7 o'clock in the evening that Friday. And so then it got to be the next morning, and we were getting hungry. And I got my high fat carnivore waffles out and I started eating one. And my husband says, "Oh, what's that?" And I told him. And he proceeded to like mow through them. And it was like, all right. So tonight, when we were talking, I said, "I'm gonna make some more of those tomorrow. Are you planning on eating them?" And he said, "Why?" And I said, "So I can make more."
Which I just want to end up and say real quick. So for those of you that haven't looked at our YouTube page, end up and go look at the videos. So the high fat carnivore waffle that she's mentioning is another video on the channel. So check that out. But that's awesome that your husband and he liked them. I enjoy them. They're so versatile. You can end up and make them into pancakes, waffles, muffins, and they really do keep you satiated.
They really did. In fact, we have a mini Blackstone on the outside of our travel trailer, and I was making, instead of high fat carnivore waffles, I was making pancakes. So, and yeah, I mean, and then we started our fat fast master class. And I joined in on a part of that. So I did that. But it was real interesting that we had to be choosy on where we did eat out when we did. Um, we met up with our kids the next night that we were there, and we went to Longhorn, or no, Texas Roadhouse. Ah, isn't that funny? I came from Texas to drive to Florida so I can eat at Texas Roadhouse. But we knew we could eat there, right? We knew we could get a steak. And so when it came time to ordering, I said, I want a steak. I want it cooked in butter. And then I want a side of butter. And they said, what sides do you want? No sides. And of course, you always get that stare, right? Like, and you don't want any sides? No, I just ordered steak. Like, and again, make sure it's cooked in butter. I do not want it cooked in oil. Okay, And so they walked away. My husband basically ordered the same thing. And my daughter-in-law looked at me and she goes, is that all you eat? And I said, well, no. And she says, do you eat vegetables? And before I could answer, my husband started answering her. It was so funny. He goes, well, like what kind of vegetables? And she goes, well, what about corn? My husband goes, well, that's high in carbs. It's a lot higher carb. And he's like, we're basically doing carnivore right now. And of course, went through the gamut of, well, do you eat, cauliflower? It's like, right now, no. Cheese, No, I eliminated that from my diet because I was using it incorrectly. And so, but it was funny because the comment I got was, oh, I could never do that. And I don't like meat. I only like chicken. Right. And I think we see a lot of that, don't we, Becky?
Absolutely. That is a common statement of, well, don't you get bored eating just meat? I could never do that. I could never eat only meat. I mean, it's just the people and the phrases, right? Because they think the lack of variety or diversity. Now, obviously, I end up and I add other foods in more seasonally, but I too, this time of year, I posted it on my Instagram the other day about, all of my plants that I had on my patio for my patio garden are pretty much shriveled up and dead, right?
Yeah.
It's Nebraska. We had your lovely heat that you have down there in Texas up here, and my plants just simply didn't make it. And so sure, I could go, to farmers markets and still end up and get good quality produce, but I just simply use that as my transition back into eating, more of a carnivore based or animal based. And I say that because I also incorporate, the Power Pucks, which it's only protein, fat, and pork rinds. So it depends what version of, carnivore you're doing. But yeah, I started to pull that out, and I'll do multiple fat fast days during the week. And so it's just going back to, more of a carnivore approach during the wintertime for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, coming from, carbs, sugar, trying to follow the American diabetes recommendation for food, things like that, which was causing me to get sicker and sicker. And when I finally started going keto and I started eliminating basically processed foods, right? And course, I was using Google as my guide. But, everybody starts somewhere. And I noticed a remarkable difference when you remove that from your diet, you no longer crave it.
Mhm.
And I think that's the piece that when you hear those comments is, right, they're not able or they're addicted to, um, the processed foods, the carbs, the convenience, and I
Well,
mean, yeah, go ahead.
for many, it's out of habit, right? It's what we've been ingrained in us to what our plate should look like. And so shifting that mindset, or for some people that are more on, the non-produce carb side of things, the cake, the breads, the pasta, etc. It's more like you said, that addiction side. It is the thought or the memory around having a certain food that they tend to end up and be addicted to. Well, my grandma made this, or I had this. We also get the same thing with in our coaching that we end up when we do through BNC. Many of us coaches get, well, I could never, shift my eating window because I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at, 8, 12, and 6. And I could never, instead of, well, am I really hungry, or did the meal I have, 3, 4 hours ago, was it enough to satiate me? Now, don't get me wrong. Some people, need to shift those hormones and open that up more to even like a circadian aligned, eating when the sun comes up and eating before the sun sets. But for many, it is just the emotional connection. So they end up and they have to work on that mindset side of things a lot when they first look at eating a different way, especially that goes against mainstream.
Right, right. One of the things I did do, so I'm going to show this to everyone. Becky, I'm going to have you explain what this is. I took this jar with me to Florida, and I use this every day. So go ahead and tell everyone what this is.
So solarized water. Essentially, it is sitting. Now, you can solarize water in many different ways. You can end up and use like tinted glass, um, any color of the rainbow to end up in solarized. But this basically it's sunlight charged water, and it helps to build the exclusion zone, which we go into detail, or I go into detail in our intuitive step meeting on why that is important, and especially in the aspect of inflammation in the body. But sunlight charged water also has the benefit of being a very powerful antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial property to it when it comes to the body and the skin. But it also helps to create a cellular hydration versus just drinking water, because we're thirsty. It actually gets into the cells and helps on that aspect. And there's a lot, anywhere from gut health to brain health to energy. I mean, the list goes on about the benefits of solarized water.
Yeah. So, that was, let me tell you what, I wrapped that jar carefully in the travel trailer because that is something that I do here. And that is something that I did while we were 2 weeks in Florida. So, it, all the things, and I even took all of my, blue blocker glasses and utilize those. The only thing that I was unable to utilize that I do here at home was I could not use the grounding patches. And because the travel trailers aren't set up quite the same, I could have gotten a rod and drove it into the ground and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I didn't go that far. It was like I did other things, So, but it was planning. It made it easy. I mean, and then we sought out places that had like seafood. And so I was eating things like bacon wrapped scallops that were grilled in butter. I even asked for butter, clarified butter on the side, and the flavor, because they used an oak smoke on it, was so good that I didn't even use the butter on my scallops. I ate raw oysters a couple times. So it was, again, it was planning to, we knew this one restaurant that when we used to live in Florida, we could get chicken wings. And I know that they make them in tallow, cook them in fat, right? And even the sauce that came on it is basically hot sauce, right? So was nothing. So again, I think we ate there. I think I was four times we ate there. So I mean, again, it was just planning it out and where you could go. And I mean, we went into an Irish pub, and they had this. I got the burger, and it had the bangers, on it, and like they layered it like, and an egg, like runny egg on it. It was so good that we had to go back another time and eat there. And I had the exact same thing as well. Here's the big key to all this. In Texas, with this 100+ degree heat, my blood sugars don't play nice. Right? In Florida, I was getting up and walking around the RV park in the mornings, getting my morning sun, the sunlight, the sunrise, and it was like 77 degrees. And I would watch my blood sugar respond so much better without that high heat. We went to the beach. I got to ground a couple times in the evening, just walking barefoot along the surf there, and the water's coming in. It was high tide starting to come in, and just walk. We walked and we stood there, and the moon was out. It was gorgeous. And then on our last day, we got up at 5:30 in the morning. We drove over to the beach about 15-20 minutes, parked, and we went out and we walked the beach and we waited for that sunrise. And the electricity, the feeling of grounding on the wet sand is so much different than grounding in my backyard in the grass, right? I knew I was healing. And you can touch on that, Becky.
Well, not only does the wet surface make it more conductive, but then you have the massive body of water, that is also a huge grounding aspect, as well as just like you said, the magnetic field of the earth. When we look at it based on, the location, when you are able to end up and really submerge yourself in the water, it's a whole nother layer of, grounding and an aspect. But yeah, even just the wet sand. Now, are you able to ground in the backyard? Absolutely, 100%. But you've also had 100+ degree days where things are a lot drier. So if you think of it as far as, like a electrical current, if you will, and of course I always relate it to an electrical fence because I'm in the middle of Nebraska. So many of us know what a fence, feels like if you end up and you grab it, but yet you end up, having shoes on or, a dry surface. It's going to end up and zap a little bit, less intense than if you're standing in a puddle of water or, your hands are wet or whatever. It's going to give you a whole different shock um, an electrical zap as far as, what's going on. But yeah, it definitely ends up and it makes a difference as far as where we're located. So utilizing, as much as you can for people that end up and go to the beach. And I actually had a coaching client that had a beach house, and she was having some issues, and I said, just go to the beach for a couple months. She works remote, and so she can go kind of like what you did, traveled and still ended up working. And I'm like, just go to the beach for a couple months because it's just so much different. And she's doing all the circadian stuff. She's getting the sunlight, she's getting, the grounding in. She's eating more of a high fat carnivore approach. Um, so yeah, and she's seeing the improvement. But
Yeah, I definitely seen my blood sugar numbers completely changed during this trip. And like you said, I was still working. You know, that didn't stop. We didn't take time off. Uh, so we were, but my gosh, when lunchtime came around, got my tennis shoes on and I walked out and I walked the park. And I think several times I was talking to you on the phone as I was walking, right? And the
yeah,
sun so I was getting the vitamin D. I mean, all these things are the pieces that I personally was missing because I couldn't get the blood sugar numbers to come down. I couldn't get, I couldn't lose any weight. I could, like, nothing worked. And it was so frustrating because, you know, we all compare ourselves to other people. And it's like, well, how come, this person over here in, a few months just lost 50 pounds? Like, and I'm over here going, I lost two,
yeah,
or I didn't lose any. Or I did 100-hour fast and I gained weight and my blood sugars got worse. Like, what pieces was I missing? And I think that's where it goes, healing the whole body, going beyond the nutrition, which is our BMC community. It takes that level and takes us up steps, again. The blue blocker glasses, which I should be wearing right now, but then you know, so as soon as we're done, they're going to go on. I even purposely, so when you travel in a travel trailer, the bathroom, you step on the pedal to flush the commode, right? But you have to fill it up a little bit with water or else, it's not good for the rubber ring on it. And there's all kinds of stuff. So I had a red light and I plugged that in. So it was motion sense when I stepped into the bathroom, the red light would come on. It was just enough light that I could use the bathroom and go back to bed. So that was just like another little thing that has helped me. So,
yeah, absolutely. It doesn't disrupt that circadian rhythm. And one thing that I want to end up and point out was you have done several fasts over, the time that we've been speaking to each other, and part of that was the 100-hour fast, but you've also done some of the shorter ones. How would you say your body responds differently to those fasts that you've done in the past versus now being able to do the fat fast that we ended up and did the master class on?
the fasts that I've done in the past were a struggle, and my body definitely, I would test ketones, they just weren't there. My body just flipped out. My body could not handle a 24 or 48-hour fast. Um, Now my body can handle 16, 18s. But anything beyond that, my body just rebelled. Since I took the master class of the Fat Fast 2.0 that is offered in the BNC community, um, I've seen a big change. So the protein was modified from what I was normally doing. And I raised the fat, meaning, I was doing these power pucks. I was doing the butter bites. I was doing yolks of the egg, um, and followed that. And I literally watched because I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I watched my blood sugars go down and stay down. And it might blow up, but it comes down. And I'm very satiated. Um, it's crazy, but go ahead.
So did you ever end up, and many people when they're fasting, they're constantly thinking of food, or they're feeling like they're having to white knuckle it and, feeling hungry in between time. Did you ever have any of those cases?
I did. And that's where I would have to go and drink like bone broth, beef bone broth. And it was a struggle. Headaches. And I can't even begin to tell you how exhausted I was. I just didn't have the energy. And kind of, those carb, when you eat a big carb lunch, and then you hit that afternoon slump and you just want to crawl in bed. I was having those again. Like I wanted to go take a nap in the afternoon, like dead dog tired. It was a super struggle. You know that because you and I talked, when I was going through it. But yeah, I mean, my body was definitely not ready for that.
For the regular fasting.
For the regular water fast.
And so when you've done, because I know you've also done multiple days of the fat fasting, did you have that exhaustion?
Not at all. In fact, I felt like I had more energy, alert, just I actually feel better on the higher fat and modified protein approach. I definitely I like it, right? Even I was in a high stress situation several times when we were in Florida. And yes, my blood sugar responded accordingly, right? It raised with the stress. But I don't think it would have, I think it would have been a lot worse had I been trying to force, a stress on top of a stress. So I mentally, depression wise, anxiety wise, I think it helped a lot.
Which is what the fat fast is designed for, is to provide that mental clarity, to provide that energy, still mimic the benefits of fasting, but not make you feel like you're white knuckling, or that you're completely exhausted, and not make you symptomatic. So, and that's good that you ended up and had the right responses, right? And
Right.
of course, we end up when we hear all around, of where people are discussing, adequate protein. And there's several different, theories or suggestions, let me end up and phrase that, out there as far as how much we need. And I had shared a article with you in regards of what Dr. Funk had talked about, in regards of how much protein we need. And it was very insightful based on those that, speak in regards to high protein. Now, of course, everything has, and high protein works for some. I'm not disagreeing, but when we see a difference between, like you said, when you were doing high protein and things weren't budging and, you were gaining weight on traditional fasting, to where if we switch things over and get your body more leptin sensitive, insulin sensitive, and allow your body to do more of the natural or intuitive things. Because I mean, you don't force meals. We don't force, eating when you're not hungry, even during the fat fast. If you need, something, like you said, if you were hungry, then you know that the option's there. But
I think with that article with Dr. Jason Fung that you sent me, the big thing that stuck out for me was when he talked about the skin and how people on his program who lose more than 100 pounds he doesn't send them to a plastic surgeon to have skin removed because, right?
yeah. So the body, the connective tissue in the skin and the blood and the dermis and all of this that we end up and typically have excess of, and as we end up, we lose weight, so the fat is going to end up and be converted to ketones. Obviously we need the leptin and we need these hormones, and that's where shifting our macros a little bit, shifting what we're doing, shifting into more of a circadian aligned, appropriate, and getting those hormones shifted allows the body to know, hey, we have energy reserves. We can burn through the fat, right? The leptin is docking to the hypothalamus at night. It knows that it has these energy reserves. But the other aspect, when we do, and that's where fat fasting come in. That was one of the things I said during the masterclass, was it's like training wheels for standard fasting as we're balancing these hormones. And we're mimicking a lot of the biological effects. We are basically training our body to end up and do lipolysis, right? Get out of burning glucose for its main fuel source. But one of the things, yes, that Dr. Fung talked about was we have the ability, instead of removing, 20, if anyone's ever, watched the TLC shows where they do all, the skin removal and stuff, it's usually 20, 30, maybe more. And I'm not against anyone that has had the skin removal surgery at all. But when we do intermittent fasting, or we do, some form of fasting, we can break down those proteins that are in that skin and use it instead of, is basically summarizing obviously what he wrote. I could pull up the study in regards of his exact words, but essentially it was the fact of being able to have less intake of what we are consuming in a exogenous form, and using more of the energy that we have, creating more of this energy balance, if you will, based on, and we talk about this with the grounding also, and gathering electrons and building this, negative charge of the body. But the same thing comes when we look at it from a side of the protein and the fats. But we really have to look at what we are carrying on our structure, if you will, in our temple, if you will, however you want to end up and phrase that. But yeah, if we end up, when we break down that skin and that connective tissue, it is the amino acids, it is the proteins that we can end up and use, and then, like I said, the fat cells, so we can use as ketones.
Well, and it, like I said, what he wrote just resonated with me, because I was the one that went, okay, I was taught that you eat a gram of protein per your ideal body weight. So I'm running around trying to shove down my throat in a day 130 grams of protein. And you know what happened? my body gained weight
Mhm. And blood sugars went up.
and my blood sugars went up. So reading this article, it was like light bulbs going off as to why that was. Now, again, my body is resistant to practically anything and everything. And that's why all the pieces in the puzzles of doing all the extra stuff that I'm doing, I have to. Because, well, number one, the alternative is I could go back to the way I was, gain weight, get back on my meds, and die a death that I really particularly don't. I mean, we're all going to leave someday, but I would like to do it more healthy. I mean, I'm lifting heavy weights. I'm bench pressing up. I'm up to 60 pounds now of bench pressing. All of this is unheard of that I just never would have done. But yeah, that article was interesting, and I even gave it to my husband to read.
Which it is the fact, there's such a wide variety, and there is no one size fits all, but for some of these people that either have weight to lose or they have, some issues that they want to end up and correct, I think it provides another perspective, right? It provides another physician or influencer, or whatever you want to end up and say, that has such knowledge on the case, right? He ends up, he's very well knowledgeable. He's wrote several books in regards. And one of the questions in there was in regards of, does he worry about protein deficiency? Because that is one of the things, that a lot of people end up and talk about is when you are doing more of a low, moderate, adequate, whatever word you want to end up and put on it. I don't necessarily like the low protein aspect because I still think it's adequate, right?
Sure.
And he had talked in there about, if that was the case, if protein deficiency was a problem, then why in the span of 3 years that he had been doing it, did his body composition not change into, all just fat, right? Why did he not lose any of his lean muscle mass? Why, and the argument out there for a lot of people is protein suppresses appetite. I'm not going to disagree. That may end up to be true, but it also, for many people, doing more of an adequate protein and the fat side of things is where the satiety comes in too. So I think we really need to quit jumping, one side or the other and realize there's individual ways of doing it.
Most definitely. I mean, my body responds way differently than my husband's body. And I'm eating again higher fat where he's not, but he's also a man. And he's also, he's come off his type 2 diabetes medicine. But again, his body, I mean, he cheated when we were in Florida. Like he had some alcoholic beverages, and we watched he wears a CGM spike and then fall right back down. Where I knew that if I had a drink, let's say an alcoholic beverage, that my blood sugar probably would have went through the roof and then not come down for hours and hours. And I mean, and hours. And we've seen that when I tried to flex back in, I think it was May. I tried to do a flex, and my blood sugar, the little, it stopped at 400, and I was flipped out. And I didn't have like a bunch of carbs. I had like good carbs.
Yeah,
I
whole
had
food.
whole food. And that's what it did to me in May. And it was a good wake-up call. It was a learning lesson where I knew my body was nowhere near ready to flex. And there's a time and place for that. Absolutely. You have to know where your body is at individually. It's taken me, I'm almost been at this, it'll be 2 years in October. It's taken me all this time to figure out what my body likes, what it responds to versus what other people's respond to. I had to finally just shut the world out and concentrate on what was working for me and not worry about this person over here lost way more weight than I did.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing all of that, I'm now finding people that is in the same boat as me. We have a gal that just joined our BNC community, and she's literally sitting in my boat. She hasn't discovered like all the other stuff yet, but she's going to learn that through the BNC community. But my heart breaks for her because I know that struggle. I know that struggle well. Even at the point that I'm at now, my body still is a snail's pace at this.
Yeah. But it's progressing in the right direction. So, even though kind of going back to the tips that I ended up and I shared on my Instagram this morning, right? You're tiptoeing, but you're tiptoeing in the right direction. And that's ultimately what ends up and matters is you are able to see that progress. Maybe not, Amazon fast, which is one of the things that, I speak to a lot, and you'll have periods where, we have another person in the community that was pretty much, set on what she was doing and shift things a little bit, and she's seeing progress again. So that ends up and happens too, where we hit a stall.
Yeah. Well, that's because you messed with her coffee.
I did. I told her that not to have coffee first thing in the morning, but
there's
a whole other information to that as far as not having coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. It does not matter to me, even if you put fat in your coffee and have a fatty coffee, or there's name brands out there such as but the versions of fat, I'll just end up and phrase it that way to stay on the good side. But not doing that, eating a meal first. But there's, like I said, you're tiptoeing your way through, and there's ways of looking at what we're doing, what you're doing, and still planning your day out, planning the progress out. When you look at the small picture, you may not end up and see it, but if you end up and you look at the bigger scale picture, you've had really great progress as far as what you've been doing. So
and I think that's why I'm out here. And and I would have never 6 months ago, I would have never thought I'd be sitting here on a YouTube like a co-host and telling my story and all of that. But I suspect I'm there's a lot of people out there like me that are still struggling, still working through the progress. What people don't see is they're not seeing me on the other side. They're seeing me go through the struggle. And I decided it was super important for me to put myself out there so they could see it, so they don't see the size 5 Sherry that is on the other side, and oh look, and I did it this way. It's like, no, this is me. I still have about 85 pounds to lose, and I'm struggling, and y'all are seeing me go with this struggle. I know I would relate to that more, and it just was super important that why I put myself out there.
Well, and part of that is also, obviously what we ended up, titling our YouTube of one, we are real people and we're just having, the discussions that many people don't want to end up and have or don't have. But we're real people, we're not any fancy people. We're not, but we also look at this from a different perspective, right? We are beyond the nutrition. We are looking at healing the whole body, and it all intertwines. And we have to have all these pieces of the puzzle aligning. Otherwise, we don't create that beautiful picture. We don't end up and move, forward. We sit and we are struggling, right? We end up, and we also have the ability to have a community where we can talk about it, not only on here, but be able to support each other, get, different perspectives, and really look at different journeys. I mean, not that you may end up and take all that information. It's not a one size, right? You are like that sponge. You soak up what's important to you. You let the rest end up and, come another day. But right now, soaking up what's valuable to you.
Well, and the funny thing is even though I'm a coach in the BNC community, I'm learning too. Like we're all students, even though we're coaches, and we're all learning, what we have to tweak and what we have to do. And I think that community aspect is the most important. One of the meetings that I host inside the community is called Supercharge Your Mindset. And it is the absolute only meeting that we have that is not recorded. And it was done on purpose because it is a safe place for people to come inside the community, get that support, and talk without knowing there's anything recorded. We can say what we need to say. We help each other flip things around. I mean, I think a couple weeks ago we had a whole conversation about bras. I mean, that was the funniest conversation, but it was interesting because we were all like, oh my goodness, like this whole bras conversation that just kind of morphed into a lot of different body dysmorphia things and things like that. So that I think we get a really large and good response from that. And I host them for anybody that's from the community that watches it. I'm at 11:30 Central a.m. On Fridays. Every Friday, I do that for an hour. And you don't have to participate. You can just come listen and so forth. So it's we have so much for everybody, but it and can I talk about the money aspect of it, Becky?
Sure.
This is the only program that I've seen out there, right, wherever out there is, that is extremely affordable. We're not talking hundreds of dollars. We're not talking, $50. We're not talking even $20. We're talking, and I'm going to say it, $18 a month. When you use that code that Becky just flashed across and join with that code, it's $18 a month. How many Starbucks coffees is that? That's a one meal that you don't eat out that you saved. And you're getting a whole lot of Beyond Nutrition to help heal you. And I'm passionate about it because I want people to experience what I'm experiencing and what other members in our community is experiencing as well. And in fact, in a few minutes, you're going to have what meeting?
The nutrition macro fasting. So it is so we have 10 meetings per week. All of us coaches end up and do at least one. So can end up and come to that coach's meeting, relate with that coach, and then end up and be able to book a session or whatever the case may be, as we do have, a coaching circle. But on Monday nights, I end up and I do the nutrition meeting. So it follows directly after this live stream. And then we have the general wellness meeting. So Coach Dave does general wellness on Mondays also. And we have breath work, we have mental health, we have brain body health, we have intuitive steps where I speak in regards of all things circadian rhythm, grounding, talk about, the exclusion zone water, structured water, all sorts of benefits or modalities, I guess, in regards of that meeting. I do the aromatherapy meeting where we actually this last week just had 2 special guests that come in and spoke to us about essential oils. I've known them for about 9 years. So that was kind of fun to, bring them in, introduce them to the community or the community to them, vice versa. But yeah, and how they've used them anywhere from, a hospital that has been opened with an aromatherapy and Reiki and acupuncture wing. And then we have the onboarding meeting so that I, show people around, show them, what all we end up we offer. And then, like I said, we have, I missed the 9dimensional breathwork meeting on Thursdays with Coach Kevin. So we have a lot of great meetings, and yeah, it's only $18 a month. So you're getting the option of doing, 10 meetings a week, 10 meetings that you end up and you have, community for. And like you said, even though you were talking about supercharging your mindset and it went, to talking about bras, it turned and it went back to the body dysmorphia as far as, the mindset factor around that.
Yeah, definitely. And the last thing that I didn't get to talk about was the salt cave I got to do. And yeah, that was fascinating. I literally was driving by, seeing a store that said Salt Cave on it, and looked it up, and ended up, my daughter and I went and did a salt cave, which is a room that was lined with pink Himalayan salt, and even on the floor, and for 45 minutes. I ended up purchasing 2 salt lamps, a gray one and a white one. And the gray one, I learned, has higher magnesium, and the white one is higher in potassium. So I'm trying, we're going to reach out again to the owner. She has quite a story to tell, and we'd love to bring her on here. So I'm going to reach out and see if we can't get her to come on and talk more in depth about it, because it was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have, a couple special guests lined up to end up and come on YouTube. So be watching the channel for those announcements, because one of them will be yet in September. So that'll be exciting to end up and bring more guests on. I mean, if you haven't watched any of the videos where we do end up and have a guest, I mean, it's wonderful having just, the 2 of us and our real conversations, but being able to bring guests on and really introduce them to the community and provide perspective, whether it's about a product or just a story about, like our coaches telling their stories, anywhere from Kevin with MS to Sly with, mental health issues, to even Laura that we did a couple weeks ago or week ago. Any of those are amazing stories. So definitely check those out too. But I guess I keep an eye peeled as far as our stories that are coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this was fun. I hope everyone got a kick out of how Sherry survived vacation slash not vacation, living in a travel trailer for 2 weeks, and how I stayed on track. So,
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, my dear. And for anyone that is watching this, obviously, check out our Instagram. You can find us on Instagram. We post our stories, we post, our day in, day out as far as what we're doing. Sherry is Step by Keto Step. I am just my name, right? I am me. No, I am Becky Niles. So I post, my day. And that is one of the things I will say about, our Instagrams. We don't just post the highlight reel. I posted my readiness score about, it not being where I would like it, but that can end up and be a whole nother YouTube. But because things were a little bit off. And that for me, that is part of, why I do what I do is, something's off. Well, you don't know what to change if you don't know what's going on. So,
and don't forget to subscribe so you know when we are live. And gosh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you
absolutely,
tonight, Becky.
it was wonderful.